NBC's Aaron Gilchrist is live for us in Pittsburgh, where Kamala Harris has been camped out for debate prep. Michael Waldman was Bill Clinton's head speechwriter in the 90s and helped him prepare for his big debates against Bob Dole in 1996. He's also president of the Brennan Center for Justice. Elise Jordan served in George W. Bush's White House and State Department. She's also an MSNBC political analyst, and she joins me here in studio. This is going to be interesting. I think we'll set sort of the standard there. Look, we know that Kamala Harris wants to help Donald Trump lose his cool. She just said there's no floor for him. Maybe she's trying to get him to reach it. But with these new polls showing so many people, far more than she would need, right, to potentially win this, want to know more about her. How does she balance those two things, going after Trump, but also trying to say, this is who I am?
Well, Chris, in many ways, this is her big introduction to the stage. She isn't going to be giving prepared remarks like she was at the DNC. It's not a shorter interview. It was a longish interview that she did with Governor Walz, but still, this is going to be her most unscripted performance alongside Donald Trump. So voters are going to have a chance to compare, contrast, and she is going to have to lean into how she wants to project herself. Is she the new wave? How is she not an incumbent? You're going to hear a careful balance between praising the Biden administration, yet being hopeful for what needs to come and how she is going to build on achievements, yet not while belaboring her association.
So easy, no problem at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Michael, I want to play a little of what Harris's principal deputy campaign manager, Quentin Fulks, said on our air about what they're expecting.
We are taking this extremely seriously. Donald Trump is a skilled debater. He has been in the most presidential debates of any candidate in presidential history. This will be the vice president's first presidential debate as the nominee. So it's going to be an interesting debate. But make no mistake about it, Donald Trump will be prepared, as he has always been, and he is a showman. And so we know the stakes of this, and the vice president will be ready.
So if you had the candidate's ears, what would be your best last-minute advice for Harris and for Donald Trump?
Well, given the somewhat stilted format of these presidential debates, in a way, it's like parallel joint press conferences, joint interviews. She first and foremost will want to lay out her own policies and especially have a contrast with Trump, with how she wants to see Trump defined. I think that she doesn't need to spend a lot of time talking about her childhood and the other kind of biographical thing. But I think that what she will want to show in terms of who she is to people is her strength, her command. Just as Trump in the last debate, people didn't pay that much attention to this. Yes, he lied a lot, but he also kept his cool. And that was a stride forward for him in his performance.
Yeah, he did seem to be able to say, I'm going to let Joe Biden do what he's doing. He made maybe a real-time assessment. But, Aaron, take me to Pittsburgh. What is Kamala Harris doing in these final hours, and what are you hearing from voters there?
Well, Chris, the time for debate preparation is winding down here in Pittsburgh. You can see some of the moving vans that have pulled in between us and the hotel here. We believe that those mock debate sessions that the vice president was having are winding down. They're going to be moving some things out quite likely. She's been here since Thursday, hunkered down with some of her closest advisors, going through briefing books, going through Q&A sessions, trying to workshop responses to policy questions she may get on the debate stage, and at the same time trying to figure out how to weave her personal story into the responses that she gives on these substantive issues, wanting people to understand both what she wants to do as president and who she is as a person and as a candidate who wants their support. We did have an opportunity to talk to some voters here in the Pittsburgh area. The vice president did step out of her debate prep sessions twice over the course of the weekend. I want you to hear what voters said when we asked them what they want to see from Kamala Harris come debate time.
Strength. We need a very, very strong leader. One that is going to, make the right decisions.
As far as Harris's specific, what she needs to do, I think it's just showing up, making clear that, she's capable.
I really want to see, which I know I will see, is just for her to be her and for her to be honest and tell us what she's going to do for this country. And we know she's going to do such amazing things.
Now, part of the debate prep that we understand she's been doing from sources is to figure out how to respond to Donald Trump on the stage. If he were to launch an insult or some other derogatory comment at her, as he's done on the campaign trail, part of the preparation process has been to figure out how to respond to those things. We've heard from sources as well as surrogates who were on TV over the weekend that part of the plan is for the vice president to remain calm in those situations, to appear presidential in those situations, but also be prepared to stand her ground, to call out any lies that she may hear on the debate stage, and to take Donald Trump to task on things that did or didn't happen during his time in the White House and the plans that he has going forward, trying to tie some of his ideas to things that have been presented as part of Project 2025, Chris.
Aaron, thank you for that. Let me bring in Dasha Burns following the Trump campaign from New York. And the former president, as you know, on the other hand, Dasha, has said his whole life is preparing him for this debate. But I can't imagine he's going totally off the cuff either, right?
Yeah, not totally off the cuff. At least that's not what his campaign wants, right? They have been hunkering down a little bit, not to the extent that Harris has, but according to our sources, he's been at Mar-a-Lago in more extensive policy sessions yesterday and today. That's going to continue. And look, these aren't mock debates the way that Harris is doing. And in fact, the former president has been sort of poking some fun at her for actually studying and preparing for this. And he instead has been pounding the pavement on the campaign trail. He likes that contrast. But at the same time, we have heard his allies on the air and behind closed doors are telling him focus on the policy, not the personal attacks. That's easier said than done for the former president, who does tend to get antagonized and sometimes want to hit on the personal. But the sessions preparing for the debate are focused on the policy, and it might be because that's largely what voters are saying they want to hear from him. Take a listen to some of what they told NBC News.
If you had advice for what he needs to do or not do, what would you tell him?
I'd tell him not to talk too much, stay on point on what he needs to do in this election, and I think he'll win.
I want him to continue explaining his positions. I don't want him to have the other side fluster him. I want him to stay true on point. I want him to stay focused.
Don't call her names. Just stick to the issues, you know. It's okay to call her unintelligent because she is, but don't call her anything else, and just stay away from. Just stick to the issues and how you're going to solve. Stick to the future, not the past.
And we did see a slightly more restrained Trump during the Biden debate. But the question is, now that we've seen him on the campaign trail lobbing those personal attacks, getting angry in some of his speeches, will he be able to restrain himself, or are we going to see the more kind of OG Trump? And will these policy sessions help orient him towards the issues, Chris?
A good question, Dasha. Thank you for that. So I think the difference, obviously, is he went into the Joe Biden debate believing, he was confident he was going to win the presidency. He's in a very different place right now, in spite of the fact that over the course of the last, I think it's 50 days since Joe Biden has dropped out, she got an initial jolt. We've not seen significant movement. This is still a race that is too close to call. So to Dasha's point, and actually the point of the woman who was interviewed, will he get flustered? Will he call her names? Will he go too far? What are you watching for?
Well, those were great Trump voter interviews, because it's the litany of what you hear when I'm doing focus groups from Trump voters about what they want Trump to do. Less of the name calling and the meanness and more of actual substance, which, as we know, can be quite difficult for Donald Trump. So going back to the last debate, from the moment that Donald Trump saw President Biden, he felt that he was going to win. He, had, as we know now, that was just not a good night for President Biden. And so going forward tomorrow night, it's a new candidate. It's a younger candidate. It's a woman. He doesn't do well, we know, with women. It's going to be interesting to see if he's going to go into the gutter the way that some of his supporters, and he has been doing lately, casting aspersions about, her personal life and just general nastiness. Can he stay above the fray? I don't know. It's really just such a superhuman challenge for Donald Trump, who, as we know, likes to dwell in the gutter.
Yeah, so Michael, let's talk about tone on her part, because Harris has a little bit of a balancing act, I think, right? She wants to show her strength. She has real prosecutorial skills. So she can go after Trump. She knows how. She's done it in the courtroom for years. But then you've got the thing that seems to really have resonated with a lot of folks, especially in the middle, this whole idea of joy, getting past the vitriol. So how does she find that balance?
Well, I think she has to do what she does with a smile, but with steel and strength. And you're right; it is a bit of a balance. But one thing that Donald Trump did not hear in the debate with Joe Biden was a meaningful calling him to account for his 34 felony convictions, for January 6th, and trying to overthrow the peaceful transfer of power, for Project 2025. Those are all things she can say with a smile, with some class. She's carried herself, of course, very well since she became the candidate. The trick is, of course, they're not going to be talking to each other. They're not going to be interrupting each other. I wouldn't be surprised if she leaves her answers with a hanging question or two that he has to choose whether to respond to.